Hello and welcome to the Book House. My name is Anik G. Malchian, and today's reading is for Kristi Lazzari's young adult novella, Tomorrow's Promise. Sarah Jane, quit slamming that door! Sarah heard her mother yell, but she didn't dare turn back. Her chores were finished and she was free. She raced down the road, long, brown hair flying behind her. The red dirt was warm beneath her bare feet. With each pounding of her heels on the hard ground, the wounds on her back screamed in pain, but Sarah didn't slow down until the small, white house was far behind her. Panting, Sarah finally began to walk. Sweat trickled down her back, causing her to wince as it stung her cuts. It was already hot and sticky, even though it was well before noon. July in Alabama was sweltering from sun-up to sundown. Kicking up dust clouds with her toes, Sarah began to whistle. She took satisfaction in thinking how much Mama hated whistling, but she immediately felt guilty for her obstinate behavior. Coming to the end of the road, Sarah had to dodge Mrs. Harper's chickens that were scratching in the dirt. "Sarah!" Billy Harper called. Pretending not to hear, Sarah kept walking. She wasn't in the mood for Billy. "Sarah Jane, wait!" Billy bounded off his porch and ran to catch her. "Where are you going?" The freckle-faced boy fell into step beside her. "Nowhere," she muttered, not looking at him. She stopped walking, afraid Billy might take it as an invitation to come with her if she kept going. "You okay?" he asked. Sarah was careful not to meet his gaze. Shrugging her shoulders, she said, "I'm fine." "I've got a couple of quarters. Let's go see a movie or get some ice cream." Billy proudly dug into his overall pockets and produced the shiny coins. "Thanks anyway, but I want to be by myself today." Sarah stole a glance at the boy beside her. Tall and awkward, Billy didn't have many friends. He was likable, but he was so shy that he wouldn't talk to most people. Sarah liked Billy. He didn't ask a lot of questions like other people did. In fact, Billy was the only friend Sarah had. She didn't let herself get close to anybody, especially the girls, who could be mean about her bruises. Besides, they didn't care for her tomboy ways. They didn't like to climb trees or whistle, and they would never wear pants like Sarah did. Instead, they wore their pretty white dresses and learned to cook and sew and keep house. Sarah wondered where the fun was in that. Sarah knew the only person she could trust was herself, but Billy didn't tease her, and she was grateful to him for that. "You want to be by yourself every day," he mumbled, kicking at the dirt with his worn boot. Sarah knew he wasn't trying to be mean. She could hear the disappointment in his voice and almost changed her mind. "I'm sorry. Mama wants me back soon. Maybe next time?" "I'll be home if you change your mind. The Yankees are going to be on the radio soon." "Your folks let you listen to baseball on the radio?" Sarah asked. Billy looked surprised. "Sure they do. Don't your mama?" Sarah sighed. "Only news and President Roosevelt come on our radio," she told him. "Let me know how many home runs DiMaggio hits today. They keep saying he might break Babe Ruth's record." Billy shook his head emphatically. "He's good, but not that good, Sarah. Nobody will ever come close to beating Babe Ruth's 60 home runs in 1927. Now it was Sarah's turn to shake her head. "That was 10 years ago. Somebody is bound to, and if anybody can, it's DiMaggio." "Maybe." Billy looked doubtful. Sarah started walking again. "I'll see you around. Let me know who wins the game." "Oh, I almost forgot." "What?" Sarah turned around. "Best keep an eye on your chickens. 2 of our best laying hens came up missing this morning." "What do you think happened to them?" Sarah asked. "Don't know. Papa said somebody must have stolen them. Mr. Hinckley had chickens missing 2 nights ago." "Could a dog have gotten them?" Sarah asked. "I don't think so. There weren't any feathers laying around, and we would have heard something if a dog had gotten into the chicken coop." "I'll tell Mama. Thanks." With a wave, Sarah started walking again. She wondered if her father had liked the Yankees. If he were alive, would they listen to them on the radio? Ducking into the woods, Sarah was eager for the trees to close their branches around her and shield her from the world. Here she was safe. Here she could whistle whatever tune she wanted. Here she could think. In her imagined world of dragons and sorcerers, of knights and their ladies fair, Sarah could be herself. Settling herself on the bank of the river, she breathed deeply and listened to the rush of the clear water. From somewhere upriver, echoes of children's laughter drifted to her ears. She wished she could be one of those children, laughing and splashing with playmates, but at 12 years old, Sarah had long been too old for play. Turning her attention back to the river, Sarah's spirits lifted. This was her favourite place. Far from Mama's sharp tongue and even sharp as switch, Sarah could make time stand still, even if only for a little while. The water and the trill of the songbirds calmed her. Suddenly there was a rustling in the brush, and Sarah was aware she wasn't alone. A voice rang out, clear and deep, singing an old church hymn that was vaguely familiar. Sarah jumped to her feet and hid behind the massive trunk of an oak tree. She didn't know what she was hiding from, really. Finally, a woman came into view. Hunched and limping, she wore a long grey dress. On her head was a huge straw hat with several holes. She carried a basket that she was using to gather wildflowers and plants. As she came closer, Sarah didn't know if she should stay put or make her presence known. Taking too long to decide, the woman was nearly close enough to touch before Sarah stepped out in front of her. The woman gave a startled cry and the basket went flying, its contents scattering. The stranger stood, wide-eyed. "Mercy, child! Don't you know it ain't right to go jumping out from behind trees, scaring folks?" She eyed Sarah cautiously. "I'm sorry." Sarah bent down to retrieve the basket. She knew who this woman was, and knew she shouldn't be talking to her. It would only get her into trouble. Sarah had been in the woods many times, but this was the first time she'd ever run into her. The woman drew in a sharp breath, and Sarah knew she was looking at her back. The thin cotton of her shirt had allowed the blood to seep through. "Heavens, honey! You must have taken some fall." "Yes, but it's okay," Sarah said, straightening up. She was glad the woman thought she had fallen. "I'm Virginia." Sarah looked up into the kind, dark eyes and a smiling face. Although Sarah had never seen the woman before, the face seemed somehow familiar, almost comforting. "I'm Sarah, and I'm real sorry I made you spill your basket." She handed the basket back to Virginia, now piled haphazardly with leaves and twigs. "Don't you fret about it, honey. You just gave me a little start, is all." She eyed Sarah, head cocked to one side, and sighed. "I've got something at the house I could put on that for you." Sarah squirmed from one foot to the other. Why was this woman being so nice to her? "I don't know," she said finally. "It's up to you, but take it from me. I've had my back hurt like that before. I know how it feels." "You have?" Sarah's eyes met Virginia's and held them. "I've taken some pretty nasty falls myself, honey," she answered softly. "I'm gonna head home now. You come on along if you want." Virginia put the basket in the crook of her arm and started off, leaning heavily on a knotted oak walking stick. Sarah hesitated. Her back did hurt. She wondered if Virginia really could help. Watching the woman's retreating back, Sarah fell into step behind her. Part of her was afraid, but part of her was too curious not to go. Wandering through the woods, Virginia pointed out various plants that she used and explained that some, like yarrow, were good for fever or even healing cuts, while others were useful for coughs or headaches. Sarah took it all in with a sense of growing respect for the teacher. How wonderful to be able to use things that grew in the woods to cure illness or reduce pain or swelling. Coming to a tiny house, no more than a shack, Virginia smiled. "Here we are." The yard was well kept, and a large garden ran along one side of the house. There was a water pump and a small wire pen where several chickens scratched and clucked. The front stoop was covered with pots holding all kinds of flowers. The front door creaked on its hinges as Virginia pushed it open. Inside, Sarah saw a wood stove and a table with 2 chairs. Virginia pulled one of the kitchen chairs out and motioned for Sarah to sit down. She then pulled a cobalt blue bottle from a shelf. "You'll have to pull up your shirt," she said. Sarah's eyes grew wide. For a moment she'd forgotten why she'd come. How could she let this woman see her back? She'd never let anyone see it before. Sarah hesitated, staring at the blue glass in Virginia's hand. "It's all right. I promise it will make it feel better." Sarah's eyes met Virginia's again, and she saw the gentleness in them. Folks were wrong about her. She knew it. Heaving a sigh, Sarah lifted her shirt, shame filling her cheeks as tears filled her eyes. "I'm gonna have to clean it before I can put ointment on. It's gonna sting." Sarah closed her eyes and let Virginia clean the wounds on her back, but she tried to fight back the tears that she hardly ever let herself cry. "I didn't fall," she mumbled. She didn't know what made her admit that. It was something she'd never told anyone before. Even when kids at school teased her and teachers asked what had happened to her, she always said she fell. "I know you didn't, child," Virginia whispered. Sarah turned her tear-stained face towards Virginia. "How'd you know?" A small, sad smile played on Virginia's thin lips. "I've got scars on my back, too." The liniment was cold when it touched Sarah's skin, and Virginia gently spread it over her cuts. "There now, in a few minutes it should feel better." Sarah pulled her shirt down and turned to Virginia. "Do you have any children?" "I had a son, but he passed away." Color rose in Sarah's cheeks. "I'm sorry." "It's all right. I don't mind talking about my Nathaniel. He was a good boy, but the good Lord saw fit to call him home when he was 6 years old. That's been a while back now." Sarah stayed and talked most of the afternoon, surprised that her back really did feel better. As the sun got lower in the sky, she knew she had to hurry home. "Thank you." She hugged Virginia and prepared to leave. "It's been a long time since I had company. Come back and visit with me again." Sarah smiled. She was more comfortable with Virginia than she'd ever been with anyone else, but she knew her mother would be angry if she knew. "I'll try," she answered. "Where have you been?" Mama met Sarah when she arrived at the back door. "Nowhere," she answered, entering the kitchen. Mama added rice to a pot of boiling water. "Don't you backtalk me, young lady." "I was down by the river." Mama sniffed. "Idleness is the work of the devil." "Yes, ma'am." Sarah lowered her gaze to the spotless linoleum floor. "Go wash up and set the table." "Yes, ma'am." Sarah hurried from the room to do as she was told. "Where were you all day?" Mama asked again. "Down by the river." Sarah knew her mother was not forgetful. She'd asked her twice to check up on her. "I don't want you playing down there any more. You never know who you might run into. That old Virginia Washam is always poking around there, and I don't want you talking to her." "What's she ever done to anybody?" Sarah demanded. "She used to call herself a midwife until she killed Mrs. Newsom's baby." Sarah nearly dropped the plate she held. "No!" Mama turned away from the stove, eyes narrowed at her daughter. "You haven't been associating with that woman, have you?" "No, ma'am." Sarah averted her eyes. She wasn't proud of the lie, but for the time being, she saw no choice. She'd never lied to her mother before, and shame burned in her cheeks. She didn't know Virginia well, but the woman she was with today was incapable of killing a baby or anyone else. "You just make sure you stay away from her. There's been folks missing things lately, and it can't be nobody but her." Sarah didn't want to risk her mother's anger by talking any more about Virginia. Instead, she turned her mother's attention to the missing things around town. "Billy Harper told me they were missing 2 laying hens." "Yes, I saw his mother today. Amelia Waters got her clean clothes taken right off the clothesline. Somebody ought to just go over to Virginia's and get everything back," Mama said. Sarah wished she had just shut her mouth about the thefts. It certainly hadn't diverted her mother's attention. Tomorrow she would go to Virginia's and see what she thought of all this. And that was Tomorrow's Promise by Kristi Lazzari. You can find the full thing on Amazon.
Te vienen buscando, te vienen buscando. Te vienen buscando, te vienen buscando.